Welcome, everybody, to the town hall tonight. We're definitely looking forward to introducing a bit more about the Community Land Trust and some of the most recent initiatives that we've been working on, we'll go through some existing projects with Lily, who's one of our senior development managers. We'll talk to you about a brand new seniors co-op that we're working on, and also a redevelopment opportunity with Hoy Creek Housing Co-op. And then Tanya, who's our director of operations, will talk to you a little bit of what it means actually to be in the CLT portfolio and what we refer to as a CLT co-op, with different types of relationship and management structure with the Community Land Trust. That some things might be familiar to you and some things might be a little different. And then we'll end off the presentation this evening to really kind of talk about opportunities of how we do different partnerships in the CLT and what those options are, whether it be you're just interested because you might have a client that's a co-op, or you are representing your own co-op here tonight. And then we'll leave lots of time, because we find some of the best conversations and information is gathered through the Q&A, to have really that dialogue. So at that point, at the end of the presentation, we'll open it up and allow people to have an open dialogue. And we've got other people from our team here too as help. Kendall is here from our development team, and Natasha as well from the operations. So we have quite a panel of us here to hopefully answer any of the questions that you may have. So just a quick introduction to the Community Land Trust, but we always like to really start our presentations at the high level. What is a Community Land Trust, just in principle? Because it's a type of model that's used around the world, not just for housing, but for conservation for different land for different uses. But in the context of the presentation and what we're talking about here today, it's really going to be about the preservation of land for housing. So we look at the definition of a community land trust. It has to be a nonprofit organization and with a particular goal. And in the context, like I mentioned for tonight, that goal is to preserve, steward, and hold land to solve problems the pure markets often struggle with. So who are we as the Community Land Trust? Obviously, we're part of the CHFBC group of entities. CHFBC is the owner or the sole member of the Community Land Trust. And we're a nonprofit social purpose real estate developer whose purpose is to create, preserve, steward permanently affordable homes in diverse and mixed income communities. Just a kind of a quick history. Some people have attended presentations before. Some people might have a lot of history and knowledge of the Community Land Trust and know that it actually dates back all the way to 1993. In the infant stages, it really was what I refer to as just a holding company, and it had 6 properties into it. And there wasn't a lot of real interaction. There's 5 co-ops and 1 nonprofit. And there wasn't a lot of interaction with the CLT and those co-ops and the nonprofit. And it really was in about 2012 of how to use the Community Land Trust for a breakthrough opportunity to develop on 4 city sites in the city of Vancouver that added 358 homes to the portfolio, and then really kind of launch it as a growth vehicle for cooperative housing in BC and advocacy of co-op housing and community land trusts, not just across Canada, but worldwide. And we started to really gain traction in 2017 to where we are about right now, where we've added about, we've gone from a small portfolio of just under 500 units, where we have about 1,200 that are now occupied with both co-ops and nonprofits. And then about another 1,400 homes that are either under construction right now or will be starting construction in the next year. So we've seen quite a bit of growth and uptake, not just for affordable housing, but in particular with co-op housing. And some of our greatest projects that we've been able to achieve with this growth is working with the existing co-ops for redevelopment opportunity. Back to our mission statement, it's at the very top there. Often people say, well, how do we achieve this? And we talk really high level at the very beginning of what our objectives are. So our objectives and how we achieve our mission statement is we provide and preserve access to a growing number of permanently affordable homes for marginalized low and middle income households. So this really goes back to like our communities are very diverse, and mixed with different types of affordability in them. And we also support the development of well-governed resident communities that are inclusive, connected, welcoming, and well-maintained. And we strengthen the knowledge and capacity of the community housing sector to amplify impacts within BC and beyond. So we have a component of where we work with partnerships, we're building buildings, but we're also an advocate for the sector as well, which is why we're all doing this event tonight too, is to educate people on what we're doing and what Community Land Trust, not just our Community Land Trust, but what Community Land Trust in general can do. So with that, I am going to turn it over to Lily, which will get into some exciting stuff to kind of talk about some existing projects that she's working on.
Thanks, Tiffany. I appreciate it. So as Tiffany alluded to, we've got a lot on the go and we do lots of different types of partnerships. So this may include working with nonprofit partners who are going to operate the buildings, but a lot of it includes working with existing or brand new co-ops. Tiffany mentioned we've got almost 1,200 homes that are now occupied, with 1,045 homes under development and 527 homes which are under construction currently. Though we do lots of different types of partnerships, with a target portfolio of approximately 3/4 co-op, and then the rest are like our nonprofit partnerships, as well as some potential for shared equity, which is a type of affordable homeownership model, and some retail, which we see on the ground floor of some of our more urban buildings. And though we have this kind of target portfolio, I'm only going to talk about 2 example future projects today, both which focus on co-ops. So we do have a brand new co-op coming online at 3510 Fraser Street in Vancouver. This project is going to have 58 homes, which includes studios and 1 bedroom. It's targeted to a more senior population. So how seniors are defined in this instance is 55 plus. It's going to be a brand new co-op, as I mentioned, and it's thanks to significant partnerships and contributions from BC Housing's Investment in Housing Innovation Fund, which is no longer available to projects. This was a previous government initiative that this project was approved under, but also because this is municipal land. So this project is a partnership with the City of Vancouver through the Vancouver Affordable Housing Agency, or what's known as VAHA, as well as BC Housing, and there is a small federal grant involved in seeing this project realized as well, and that federal grant through CMHC. So because of this partnership model that we have on this project, we're looking at average housing charges of around $1,200 a month, and this is to cover the mortgage and the operating expenses. It is going to be run in a nonprofit model, so we are not extracting significant profit like you would see in the private sector, but just to maintain the homes, we need to keep housing charges around $1,200 a month on average. Some will be lower, some are geared towards individuals that have lower incomes, and some will be higher so that we can keep that average. And the other project I wanted to talk about today is Hoy Creek. Hoy Creek has a long-standing history in the city of Coquitlam, and it also has a long-standing history with CHFBC and CLT. CLT started working with Hoy Creek Co-op around 2016 in order to see new homes for the co-op realized. So the co-op is still struggling with homes that are in disrepair. They're reaching the end of their life expectancy, and the co-op really does need new homes. So we're building them brand new homes on a portion of their land, and there's going to be 132 new homes in this new building, 97 of which are going to be existing housing co-op members, and 35 which will go to new co-op members. And this project is really only made possible because of significant grants and contributions from both BC Housing through their Community Housing Fund, which provides long-term low-cost financing, as well as an ongoing operating subsidy for the length of the mortgage, as well as the City of Coquitlam's Affordable Housing Reserve Fund, which is contributing over $3 million to this project. Because of these contributions, we're able to target the affordability per the BC Housing Community Housing Fund, which has affordability at 20% of the units targeted towards shelter rates of social assistance, 50% of the units that are rent geared to income based on the provincial housing income limits, and 30% of the units targeting rents or housing charges that are considered low end of market. So these ones are around 80 to 90% of what is considered market for the area. The target population is families, singles, couples, and seniors. And again, this reflects very much so the existing population at Hoy Creek Co-op. And we started construction on this one in March of this year. So our estimated occupancy is spring of 2023. And I just want to reiterate on this one that because of the significant contribution from the province as well as the city, but also the fact that the land was held by the community housing sector is really what made this project possible. And yet we're still going to see affordability that is estimated to be around $976 on average for housing charges. But the existing members will see that they are going to be required to pay 30% of their gross household income towards their housing charges in order to make this project possible. So it's very rare, even with significant contributions from multiple levels of government, that people can maintain paying 10 to 15% of their income towards their housing charges. This project is a great example of how we can resolve some pretty challenging issues, but it's also a good example of the limitations of what we can do even with significant investment from multiple levels of government. And now I'll pass it on to, I believe, Tanya to talk about some of our existing projects that are occupied. Thanks.
Thank you, Lily. So about CLT model in general, and as it has been pointed out, so big part of everything we do here is partnerships and different level of partnerships and between different entities. And the main partnership obviously is between CLT and housing cooperative. And in this partnership, they both play different role. CLT is the steward of the land, and co-op and their members, they are looking after community, and both work together to ensure long-term goals are met, and the most important ones are around sustainability and preservation of buildings, land, and community building. So and if we compare to traditional co-ops, they were formed and built under federal or provincial programs. Those co-ops primarily had the relationship with the regulator, with the federal or provincial government. So in CLT model, the primary relationship is between co-op and CLT. And CLT takes care of agreements with the financial institutions, with the municipalities and cities, and this belongs to CLT. So in terms of financial responsibilities, both community land trust and co-op have financial responsibilities, but they are different. So CLT is responsible for servicing long-term debt, and also annual and long-term property maintenance, obviously managing of the asset, and additional rent payments. So co-op has its own financial responsibilities. One of the primary of those responsibilities is meeting its financial targets. Obviously, managing member payments, looking after arrears, approval of housing charges, and also monitoring the responsibilities under the agreement. So on this slide, you can see visually how those relationship and partnerships, so how they align with each other. And as we already touched base, so CLT first, for co-op to happen, CLT has to secure source of financing and also enter in relationship with the landowner. So it's which mostly municipalities, cities and municipalities. This is where this relationship starts. So CLT has to secure land and financing, and property, consequently, property and asset management is primary responsibility of CLT. CLT enters into a head lease agreement with the municipality. So this is fundamental primary lease agreement. Later, CLT subleases the premises to housing co-op, and housing co-op responsibility becomes around there are financial responsibilities, but also community building and responsibilities around membership and governance. Now, on this particular slide, as you can see, co-op are able to do it because of support of their management companies, and management company hired by the co-op looking after administration, accounting, membership, and also provides community building support. So existing co-ops that we already have in CLT, most of the existing co-ops we already have in CLT portfolio, they are within these models that described on this slide. So they have a relationship with CLT. They also have management company, and management company is looking after the co-op as their organization, and it's separate from CLT. So with the new model, and you see CLT is fairly young organization, within CLT itself, we recently came to developing a new model, how the relationship and partnerships with housing co-ops are organized. What was the reasoning behind a new model? And why we came to it, CLT came to it. So success of every business or failure of every business, it's 90% about communications and 10% about other aspects of the business. And CLT is not immune. The original CLT model, it's fairly new compared to existing housing co-ops that were formed in 70s, 80s. And there are, of course, when you have multiple organizations interacting and you have multiple levels of those interactions, and you have very, very multifaceted type of relationship, communication is the key. And the more players and the more stakeholders you have in this communication, the more challenging it becomes. So we just came to realize that it can be actually very much simplified and condensed and enhanced to enhance the CLT model itself. And within new co-ops that CLT now working with. So as you can see on this slide, so the same relationship and the same partnership remain, but there is no separate management company. And if you look under community land trust on this blue square, you can see that community land trust representing professional property and also co-op management. So, by doing both, so managing the asset, looking after maintenance, and also managing the business of the co-op. So this is CLT is new, but within CLT we have this newest version and newest model that new CLT co-ops already functioning under. Another function of CLT is provide education. And as you know, CHBC plays huge role in member education and board education for all housing co-ops. So, but also for CLT co-ops, they provide very much enhanced education and enhanced government support for the board of directors. And on this slide, you can see how through various stages of formation of co-op, those educational opportunities are provided, and with this multiple level of education. So both CHBC and CLT they partner and they provide this significant support for CLT co-ops. And you can see it all starts from the stage of rent up, where in partnership with CHBC we're doing orientations for members and from the board, and it goes through preparing for the very first AGM and for very first election. And also the most significant portion is supporting the new very first resident board when they're elected at the first AGM. So again, CLT co-op relationship. So the most significant aspect of it, first of all, it's a very long-term relationship. It's no shorter than the length of lease itself, but also it can be indefinite. And most of the leases, they run for 99 years. We just spoke about ongoing education that are done by CLT in partnership with HBC. And also there is one area where significant support is provided is community engagement. It covers areas like policies, procedures, meetings. There is also a separate absolutely piece which about budgeting process for CLT co-ops that it's not complex, but it's a lot of interactions involved between different stakeholders. And also, there is support provided for board meetings and ongoing support for the board. So, and different tools are used in this area. And also, a lot of times we use a member experience surveys and literally starting communities. And the goal here is to organize a system of ongoing feedback. So that this feedback provided back to us, back to CLT at every stage of co-op development. Community building toolkit is a training tool that provides insight and support for new staff and for residents at the stage of onboarding. It's one of the tools that is used. Different aspects of partnership we just talked about. So in CLT co-ops, it's very, very common to engage in different partnerships with different, not just sector organization, but also in a wider sector of non-profit housing and social purpose housing. And each existing in each future CLT co-op has partnership with different organizations. And on this slide, you can see examples of those partnerships with the different organizations. So first is Community Living Society. This is organizations that provides support and services to adults with developmental disabilities. So in CLT projects, there are homes that are specifically dedicated and available to residents that come through partnership with community living. It provides additional benefits and to secure housing and provide housing opportunities to members of those society, the members of the society. And the most significant result of it is that those members are gaining experience in living independently and within the community that housing co-ops provides. So another significant partnership is Disability and Domestic Violence Trust. So it provides financial support by grants and loans available to offset housing charges for members, and also with the share purchases. So also BC Society of Transition Houses and Getting Home project specifically, it is dedicated and provided for women and their families, to those impacted by domestic violence. So there is this opportunity provided to members of going through these projects to live in new CLT co-ops and to get access to new homes through this program and through partnership with CLT.
Thank you, Tanya. Question in the chat with regards to the slide talking about the management company and whether or not Coho, the question is Coho folding in under the CLT organization? Just wanted to provide clarity on that no, Coho still is going to provide management services to co-ops, just like they've been doing for years. And hit one of their most successful years this past year as well. I think they have over, Helena's there, but she can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think they have over 6,000 households within their portfolio now, and they will continue to operate as is. One of the things that we've, as we've grown and we've evolved our relationship with especially because we've been working and what we refer to as incubating brand new co-ops and having a bunch of people move into brand new buildings that are often more complex in the building infrastructure, different layers of government requirements and funding requirements, municipal requirements with housing agreements, that the buildings need a lot of staff involvement and a lot of direct interaction with management and all of the community building things that Tanya was mentioning as well, because all of a sudden you might have 150 households that are all living in one building, and that could equate to over 200 people. And how do you generate and create community from the outset that a lot of your co-ops or your co-op clients have had decades to build that community up? But what is it like in year one? And so what we found is that for the CLT model with co-op partnerships is that we're internalizing the management side of the co-op into the relationship between the co-op and the CLT to provide a much stronger relationship that's robust and more transparent, by having the direct link between the two and not having another third-party management company, whether it be Coho or another management company that's involved. So that's one of the main changes through the past few years as we've been working on our first projects, and how we've evolved and how we've improved to make those relationships stronger and to make sure that that the communities are going to be healthy, both socially and financially, not just at the very beginning stages, but also as we move forward into the future as well. So I want to talk to you a bit about the different types of partnerships, because a lot of people that are on tonight might be wondering, like, what could the CLT do for us? We had one question already posed to us, and we'll get to that one as well and answer it. Or you, like I said, you might have a co-op client that might be looking for guidance or resources for you to put them in touch with. So we basically categorize our different partnerships into 4 different areas. There's just straight acquire, and we've done this where it can be an existing building. It doesn't need any work or anything like that. It's just a direct transfer and an acquisition by the Community Land Trust, and that could either be land or land and existing buildings. Then we have our opportunity, I guess, like acquire would be like that 3510 opportunity that Lily had mentioned to you, where we're acquiring the land from a municipality and then we're going to be building on it. I should also mention too, in the operating model, I put it in the chat, so hopefully most of you saw that, is that we do have a lot of municipal land in our portfolio, but we do have freehold land that we've acquired or acquired through partnerships with co-ops. And in that case, we actually wouldn't have a head lease with the municipality. We would go directly into a lease with the co-op and not a sublease. So just wanted to provide that clarity on that one. Then the second type of partnership that we have is where we look to work with co-ops, to redevelop or develop new partnerships as well. So a good example of this is that the Hoy Creek project that Lily had mentioned. So not only are we redeveloping and building a brand new Hoy Creek housing co-op, but the excess lands that were a part of the property that we can densify, we're going to be developing new co-op and affordable housing on there as well, with an opportunity for Hoy Creek to either expand or just say, no, we're fine with our building with 132 homes now, and more than happy to have a brand new co-op be our neighbor. Other opportunities that we're working on is renovation options as well. We've done one significant renovation option, and that's with Bakerview Housing Co-op. So back in 2017, we formed a partnership to transfer the land into the Community Land Trust. We refinanced the debt with Van City, and we're able to invest just over $5.5 million back into a comprehensive renovation into that co-op. Then the last partnerships that we have, and these are really with more municipal partnerships, where they're using the market housing and their community and what they refer to really as community amenity contributions that they extract from the private sector. And sometimes when the private sector is building housing, their developments are so large that they actually trigger complete buildings for their affordable housing requirements that the municipality is requiring them, or what they might refer to as an airspace parcel. So that might be a portion of a building So like say like if the first say the first 6 floors of a building could actually be an airspace parcel and be its own legal lot, and that could be the affordable housing, and then it might have 10 to 20 stories of market housing, either it be rental or strata above it. And so we work with municipal partnerships to purchase that based upon a delivery of an affordability level. And that's really a negotiation based upon objectives and what it's going to cost to purchase that, to debt service it as well. So when we kind of talk about working with existing co-ops, because a lot of what's been presented today is, brand new communities. Lily did touch on the Hoy Creek Co-op, and they will be going through some of those same services and that process that Tanya had talked about. If you're going through a redevelopment, you could be adding a significant number of members to your co-op. You could be looking at totally different types of building infrastructure and needing to understand those components. The funding of how to achieve a renovation or a redevelopment could add in layers too of different reporting requirements, or those priority groups for those when we talk about the concern for community, and inviting in different members that are going to target people either with CLS, for Community Living Society, with mental disability, or we're talking about domestic violence as well. So a lot of these things are getting layered on because it's a requirement of some of these funding programs to target specific priority groups that either the provincial or federal government have said that they actually want to achieve in the housing, in order for them to give us the financing to redevelop or renovate, or capital grants to help the affordability within the project. So when we engage with co-ops, we really kind of start before entering into any sort of formal agreement, is that we like to go through a true kind of engagement process with them, to have a real discussion, to work on the decision making that needs to be done for the co-op's best path forward. And that really needs to also be aligned with the CLT, with our objectives as well, which is to grow co-op housing. So we'll probably have the same objective on that, is to preserve and grow. But there needs to be a lot of discussions around, especially when you're working with an existing co-op, is like the affordability levels and understanding what it means to renovate or redevelop, and displacement of people, and where will people live. What is the new housing charges going to be? What are the different requirements that are going to be put onto our co-op with the funding program? How many more units are we going to be adding? Who are these people that are going to be coming in? So a lot of these questions come up in those initial discussions. And we really like to start off having those discussions, and then kind of really narrowing it down to kind of make the best practice decisions making forward for not only yourself, but also making sure that it's right with the community land trust as well. Then once we actually enter into that partnership, we really do start working closely with our co-op partners, those that are existing, not just in a reporting function to the board, but getting people involved in the design, especially when we get options for choice. Most often, there's not a lot of wiggle room when you talk about the footprint of your building, and then choice really comes into some of the things like color selection, and then the fun stuff, which Lily found with Hoy Creek Housing Co-op, which is when they come to the interior design, and people kind of starting to visualize what their new homes are going to look like. So like I said, there's always a relationship directly with the board that kind of updates the members, but we do engage our existing co-ops partners into the design process as well, so they feel that they have the contribution and can have their own personal stamp on their new building as well. And then obviously Tanya talked about our operational model, which has changed over the years into this new model that we're moving forward with, that really has a strong tie between the CLT and the co-op for all management services of just not the building, but also the co-op itself. Next slide. So I think we're going to open it up to questions, but before we do that, we did receive 2 questions. So I guess the first question is, can touch on way that co-ops and other organizations can advocate for the building or expansion of co-op housing and their respectable municipal partnerships. So next slide. So one of the best ways for anybody to get involved, in advocating for co-op housing or affordable housing in your neighborhood, your community, or your city is really to start learning about your local municipality and planning initiatives and getting involved in that, whether it's happening right next door to you or just in your neighborhood or city in general. The biggest influence that we all have as residents in the cities that we live in is our municipal government, and they really do control land use and also policies for requirements for affordable housing getting built and extracted out of the private sector as well. So that's kind of where we would say that you'd really start, is really educate yourself on what's happening in your local municipality. And most initiatives will always have a public consultation process. So get involved, make sure your voice is heard. Your voters in your community, your politicians want to hear from you. And it's really great when we can have stories that are being shared of people that have benefited, like yourselves or your co-op clients have, from affordable housing throughout the years. We saw some great examples of this recently with the South Falls Creek, with the area plan, with co-op members coming out and talking and sharing their experiences. So just getting involved and talking. You can also write to your elected officials. There's oftentimes municipalities will use surveys that will go out. There's kind of like Let's Talk, and it's usually Let's Talk, Richmond, Let's Talk Vancouver. You might have seen some of those where they'll solicit feedback. So oftentimes if you get that, don't treat it as spam. Get involved, get in your community, and make sure that your voice is heard either verbally or written. And I think that's the best way that you can advocate for more co-op housing and affordability. And if you have contacts with other organizations that can help make your voice louder, that's all the better. The second question that we received, and we did kind of address this on one of the last slides there, is that our co-op would like to know how the CLT can work with existing co-ops to ensure the supply of co-op housing remains into the future, and how can CLT work with co-ops when the maintenance of aging building is beyond the capacity of our small co-op building or burning out our volunteers. So like I said, we've got different types of partnerships that we've worked with existing co-ops in various capacities. And every co-op is unique in what they need. It's also unique in their size of their community and the building type and the condition of that. And we like to start from that perspective of really getting to know the co-op. What are they wanting to achieve, not just for now and next year, but also quite looking distance into the future, whether that be 5, 10, 15 years down the road. Because it really is part of our mission to make sure that we can preserve and grow co-op housing in BC. So as described in the presentation, there's some different types of partnerships that we can do there, whether you're seeking to redevelop, renovate, or it's just like you said, a co-op could just be burnout and they want to look at a different model of a relationship and a partnership and management structure as well. And just to re-highlight too, these slides will also be circulated out to the participants tonight, so you can kind of refer back to some of those partnerships. But just to highlight again, the CLT is very objective approached in the very beginning and really kind of going over what the feasibility is of those objectives. We're very direct and we're very honest. If something is being presented or looked at that's just not feasible, but we always look at, okay, what are other things that we can do in priorities for your co-op. It's rare that we can often tick things off everybody's list. Love to have lots of free money and capital grants to do that. But housing today is very challenging with construction costs, whether you're renovating or redeveloping, and understanding what that means to housing charges and if you're redeveloping, having some people, like to co-ops, could be doubling the number of memberships, and that can be scary for a co-op as well, of all of a sudden going from 30 to 40 homes to over 100 homes, and what does that mean? We do really like to have those deep conversations at the very beginning, and a lot of the co-ops that we work for, the decisions have not come immediately. We worked with Aaron Webster for 2 years on what a relationship could look like. Boyd Creek, started probably 3 years prior to the transfer of different types of rounds of conversations. And then even Sunshine Housing Co-op out in Surrey, I think that's actually going on 5 years now from 2016 from an initial discussion. So a lot of these things don't happen overnight, and it really does start with the conversation and understanding what objectives are and developing the priorities and seeing whether or not there is an opportunity to work with the CLT and can we formulate a partnership to deliver on what the co-op would like. So with that, I think we do want to open up the floor if there's questions.
Tiffany, I don't know if you want to speak more to the 95 East First opportunity while we wait for questions to roll in.
Yeah, the 95 East First opportunity was really one of those turnkey opportunities that I mentioned, and it actually came at a perfect time as well, because you also heard me mention Aaron Webster. And Aaron, one of the biggest challenges that anybody would face if you're going to redevelop is actually displacement of like, where are the members supposed to live, right? And keeping the co-op community together. The CLT was very fortunate to respond to and get awarded through a request for proposal with the City of Vancouver for 135 home building in Olympic Village at 95 East First. And we saw that as an opportunity to basically move Aaron Webster into that building at existing affordability levels. And then also we started up a brand new co-op called Rail Yard Housing Co-op, who occupies 104 of the 135 units, and Aaron Webster is 31 units. And so it's kind of these turnkey opportunities that the CLT has a chance of acquiring for municipalities are oftentimes our ability to find solutions for displacement, like Aaron Webster, that needed to go through a redevelopment. And we're looking for more opportunities in different municipalities. A lot of people like what we had done there, but it's challenging to all of a sudden acquire a brand new building, and it's only within a few kilometers of where the other building needs to be torn down. But it is a good example of turnkey and how we can use the strength of our portfolio to solve some of the biggest challenges when people are looking at redevelopment, which is displacement and keeping your co-op together as a community.
So we are a small co-op in Victoria, 18 units at Superior Street. We have gone through a complete building envelope remediation as a leaky building in 2007. We have had zero membership turnover in the last 5 years. We have a BCA. We're doing our best to stay on top of everything. We refinanced our mortgages successfully with Van City, but we can't afford to hire a management company. That's already kind of been figured out. Our interest in the Community Land Trust, and from what you've said, I'm actually not sure the Land Trust is even interested in partnering with our co-op, because we have a small plot of land in James Bay. There's limited development opportunity. We're not needing major renovations. It's literally support to preserve this housing into the future. And yeah, we are the burnt out volunteers here and trying to manage all that in the capacity to deal with the requirements of the BCA and all of that, and hire contractors, which are very difficult to find. And we don't have those kinds of resources with volunteers. So in the interest of directness and bluntness, so is that even a partnership the CLT is even going to contemplate, or should we just face reality and figure something else out?
I don't think that there's any opportunity that we wouldn't look at and to have more of an in-depth conversation, because like what I hear too is that you seem to be you're maxed out on what you can afford, but you're also maxed out with your volunteer hours and then also expertise with regards to finding contractors. So the first thing that you said was like maxed out with affordability, right? So like in full management coming in. So that's where I would probably see kind of some of the sticking point that I would like to have a discussion to unpack. The CLT does have access to different financing structures than what you would as a co-op on your own, which can lower the interest rate, which can alleviate some of that budget room. but without kind of getting into a bit more detail. And it can be as simple as just kind of a meeting with the board and kind of going through a simple analysis with the numbers and what you're trying to achieve and seeing whether or not it is beneficial, and can we provide the services and the obligations under a new legal structure with the CLT to hit the objectives and everything that you want as a co-op. And like I say, it's not just about what you need now. When you get into the discussions with the CLT, we will be asking you to look at 5, 10, 15, 20, no, and not just from a building perspective, like, so you have your building condition assessment report and your AMP, and it tells you all these things that you need to do. We're going to be opening up that dialogue and talking to you about your community and who your members are as well.
In terms of who our members are, like,
Yeah,
we have a mix of families. We have a mix of studio, 2 and 3 bed.
So oftentimes when we work with existing communities, we've got the existing community and that affordability that we need to deliver upon, right? But as you move forward in the future, you need to think about how, like there's going to be turnover in units. There's always inflation. Costs are always going up. So as you kind of do that, you might be having to look at a different income level, this type of stuff, and doing that through the natural transition of when you have vacancy at your co-op, about how, so some of the co-ops we look in, so this might have been what you were looking for because your housing charge was this, now it needs to be this much higher. So now you're going to be going after a household that fits this and can afford this housing charge, because we're going to be looking financially long-term in the future as well.
Not sure 100% understand that, other than, we have had a mix. We haven't actually brought anybody in that required subsidy for years, simply because we weren't allowed to when we were under CMHC and the workout agreement that we had with them. And then we rolled right into the rental assistance program. And again, we haven't had a vacant unit in over 5 years. So.
Yeah, well, to give you an example, some of like the CLT co-ops, like you've got your community and you've got your priorities that you're delivering affordability here. But when a unit becomes vacant, they need to start generating more revenue. So what we refer to as different tiers of the housing charges, and it might go up to what it would be if you were renting out into the private sector. So
Okay.
Right. So you might be targeting something different because you as the co-op need to generate more revenue. So what does that mean when you look at members coming in? Right. And we deal with a lot of mixed income communities, like Lily explained with Hoy Creek. You've got the existing community there, but they are going to be inviting, 30 some odd households and accepting applications there of people that are going to be paying a lot more than what the existing members are.
Okay, gotcha. Okay, I see.
So that it's no longer like all 3 bedrooms are X and all 2 bedrooms are Y. It's like you might have 3 different tiers of, like, you've got 3 bedrooms for this amount, 3 bedrooms for this, and then 3 bedrooms for even a higher amount.
That's a very interesting change in a very small 18-unit co-op. Okay, that's interesting. Okay.
Next, we have Brian. So Brian, I'm going to ask you to unmute.
My question is about, I'm on the island and have been, I've worked a little bit with some of the co-ops here, and there's a lot of really small co-ops like our previous speaker as well. And I'm wondering whether the Land Trust is looking at sort of the economies of scale for those co-ops. I know that merger has been, a bit of a difficult concept for co-ops to sometimes get around, but is the Land Trust looking at that as one of the ways of trying to help with some of the ongoing, governance problems, community building problems, to try to sort of have a body that is working on the question of the economies of scale that can happen with those sorts of mergers?
I can speak maybe just on the economies of scale from a numbers perspective, like costs, but maybe either Tanya or Natasha maybe talk about too, just like if we think about like our portfolio that's growing down in the river district, there could be some kind of economies of community building down in that area. These are softer things to kind of judge. But a lot of times like properties just have like static costs, right? There's no real economies of scale, like your property taxes, your utility taxes, your power, right? Hydro, Fortis, whatever. So those are what we refer to as your non-manageable costs. And then you have your manageable costs, which if you reach a scale, you can get economies of to bring prices down, but I'm not really sure, like when we're talking about like probably less than 100 units, if that can be done. Definitely on our management side, we can get economies of scale being in a neighborhood. But whether Tanya and Natasha have experience maybe to talk about like all the service contracts and abilities with that, whether it be landscapers, snow removal, like how much wiggle room is there in those budgets to get those economies of scale to merge co-ops together?
Thank you, Tiffany. So we definitely on this path at this point, and the very first vehicles we're heavily using CHOBC group buying programs for those services that we can. And great example is actually waste removal. In areas that we live, Lower Mainland, waste removal is one of the most expensive and most difficult to manage costs for housing providers. So we are going through CHOBC program and constantly improving and make it more suitable to those buildings. So and we are using other CHOBC group buying programs. Also within CLT portfolio itself, yes, we do explore different opportunities to get like best pricing from our vendors for both hard and soft services. So but also we have to balance this out with servicing needs of those buildings, and buildings are fairly young, right? So they specifically in Rivers district, right? So we want to find the balance between the cost and maximum benefit for the building and community provided out of those provided by those contracts. So this is path we're taking. So and will be differently go in this direction in the future.
Sorry. So how does a co-op initiate this conversation with the trust?
We've built up our staff capacity, and we're better equipped to address some of the challenges that like what Superior Street and some of the smaller co-ops are facing, like on the island, and what we can offer. As you can see to the presentation, we talked about our shifting model a bit too.
Yep.
And we needed to really have clarity and around what that model is, and understanding what it actually means to, if anything, actually move forward into engaging in that relationship and partnership with the CLT. So we're now at that place. So right now you see on the screen the info at cltrust.ca, and then we can coordinate a meeting probably with just the board and probably the familiar faces from the CLT that you see on screen here, to kind of really start that dialogue about what are your challenges that you're facing now, what are you seeking, and then we're obviously going to have some questions back as well, because we're not just going to look at the immediate future, we're going to look long term. Lily, I know that you've worked, and even Kendall, with some of the existing co-ops, through some of these conversations, and sometimes sharing experiences might be worth providing, just kind of on what you've kind of experienced in some of those conversations, which can be difficult. Some are easy, some are difficult.
I can touch on just maybe not specifics in relation to specific co-ops, but just some of my experiences in working with a variety of co-ops who are facing, very difficult decisions. Your board needs to be at a place where you can take a leadership role and make these tough decisions. We can support you in finding answers, finding opportunities, and helping you to make some pretty significant trade-offs. But if the board is not in a position where you're ready to make some very challenging decisions, then it's just not necessarily the right time, or it might take us longer to get to where you want to go. And I don't want to say that as in don't contact us. It's more of just it's going to take time, and we can't do it for you. These are your communities, you know your members best, and we want to be able to support you in making those decisions as best as we can.
Yeah, and I think you're going to see through the Federation too, some new initiatives that has been worked on with the Federation and the Land Trust. It's just a heads up, there's something that's going to come, but it's a program that's specifically designed to take co-ops through difficult decision making. And it's a combination of, some people might be familiar with the Co-op Compass program that was offered, and some people might have heard about some co-ops that have gone through the Co-op Cafe process with the CLT. So it's kind of a joint of those two programs, and it's really going to be designed to offer a different level of service to co-ops to take them through some of that difficult decision making. So look forward to some of that announcements coming out soon, because we feel it's going to be a really great program that it's going to help not only just boards, but also the general membership of the co-ops to reach decision making, because oftentimes the co-ops that we're working with have, probably spent even a decade before the CLT came involved, and often are spinning around because they can never get consensus amongst their membership on what are their objectives and priorities, and what do they need to do. And sometimes it's really great to have a facilitated process to kind of get you through a lot of emotion and information that's coming out, so that you can narrow it down into something that you can actually comprehend and understand and either agree on, so you can move forward. Yeah.
All right. So I just want to thank the CLT team for providing you all with all this information. If you have any questions, please send them along to members@chf.bc.ca or at info@cltrust.ca. Thank you again for attending tonight.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.
Good night.